Welcome to Psychology the Daf. We are in Gemara Pesachim, Daf Tzadei Ches. How does one achieve spiritual connection? Is it through some limitation, an abnegation, or is it through an expansive, ecstatic kind of sense? Now, the Gemara Nomad Beis discusses the problem of Ein Mivim Kadoshim Lebeis HaPasul, which means that we are not allowed to mingle certain sacrifices because that would artificially limit the amount of time that the sacrifice could be consumed. In other words, there are certain sacrifices, such as a korban pesach, that must be consumed that evening, while there are other sacrifices, like a bechor, which can be consumed over a number of days. And if we were to mingle the sacrifices together, one would have to consume all the sacrifices that evening out of doubt that maybe one would be extending the korban pesach meat beyond the amount of time. And therefore, it would end up that you would not be eating the bechor sacrifice in the fully allowed amount of time, but eating it sooner, which would inevitably lead to some leftovers, which would have to be destroyed, because we destroy leftover sacrifices when they go beyond the time of consumption, and therefore we're not allowed to do that. Now, the Sfas Emes and Achrei Mos Perek Yud sees in this something deeper about the potentialities and actualities of various mitzvahs. Meaning, even if a person were sure, let's say for argument's sake, all the meat that was intermingled, both of the firstborn bechor sacrifice and the korban pesach, there were enough consumers to eat all the meat that night. So in essence, none of the meat would go to waste. It's still forbidden to do so, says the Sfas Emes, as is implied in the Gemara. And the reason for that is because every spirituality has its potentials and has its time that needs to be respected. And the Sfas Emes says that the bechor sacrifice that has to be consumed in 2 days should not be rushed. Even if technically it could be consumed in 1 day, it should not be done so. It must be experienced with the potential of 2 days. And what that means to say is that when it comes to all matters spiritual, it would seem that there is a need to respect the potentialities represented within. Overdoing as well as underdoing can destroy the intended outcome. For example, the Sfas Emes notes that the service of Yom Kippur, the high priest enters into the Holy of Holies. At the same time, services all the other days of the year must be outside of the Holy of Holies. The services throughout the year require a different boundary and sense, the same way that one sacrifice is to be consumed in 2 days and another sacrifice is to be consumed in 1. Each has its own limitations and potentialities that must be fulfilled by experiencing them fully. What I think the Sfas Emes is trying to say is an important psychological lesson for us, that different relationships, different states of existence require understanding different potentialities. And some holiness requires an expansiveness with much less limitations, and other kinds of holiness require restriction. And so too, in relationships and in moments in relationships, some require a great deal of expansiveness and openness to almost anything, and others perhaps require much more limitation. And in either case, to misrepresent, to not enact that particular potentiality or limit can remove and detract from the intended outcome of the experience. Now, of course, we only have 120 years to figure this out. So take your time.